Hey, look at this. It looks like a meme, the kind of thing that you'd find on Facebook or Twitter or TikTok. It's actually a proposed billboard for public transit in the Ontario city of Hamilton. It couldn't be plainer. In fact, if I were a critic, I'd say it's boring. It's a picture of a woman with the word that says woman and adult female. And then the tagline of the proposed advertiser, bringing respect for life and truth to Canadian politics, CHP Canada. That stands for the Christian Heritage Party of Canada. But really the operative words, there's only 4 of them, woman, and adult female. It couldn't be more basic. It's dictionary definition. In fact, it was asked of Mark Carney in the French language leaders debate, and he answered it obviously, even though one of his own kids is trans. He says a woman, there are only 2 sexes. Not only has the city of Hamilton banned this ad, but a court upheld the ban. The matter is now moving forward to the Court of Appeal, but today we are delighted to talk to Leah Malusis, one of the lawyers acting for the Christian Heritage Party. She joins me now in studio. Leah, great to meet you.
Great to meet you too. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. It's such a simple ad. I mean, you really couldn't even take a single word out of it. There's only 4 words in it, and a picture of someone who's obviously a woman. The Christian Heritage Party, they just went through the normal route and said, we'd like to buy a billboard, or this is on a bus, I presume. Tell me what happened.
Yeah, so originally they were working with the City of Hamilton's agent, Outfront Media, and Outfront, engaged in the standard conversation. They discussed pricing, and then CHP sent in the image. And all that Outfront said was that this violated Ad Standards Code, the Canadian Code of Advertising Standards, which doesn't apply to political advertising. So from the very beginning, the premise of the rejection was the application of this code that is not applicable to political parties and political advertisement. But when CHP pushed it further, they didn't get any further response. So it was only at that point, it was then escalated to the city directly, and the city then undertook a review. They didn't engage in consultation with CHP, but after the decision, when the decision was released, we found out that they did engage in consultation, but on a selective, exclusive basis, only with the LGBTQ community. And so they then changed the basis for the rejection. It was no longer about alleged violations of the advertising standards code. Now suddenly it was about lack of safety and
lack of safety.
Yes. This idea that it would create an unwelcoming transit system.
You know, that's incredible. A lot of things have been done in the name of safety. We don't have to look any further back than COVID. Of course, if I recall the French Revolution, they called it the Committee for Public Safety. That's the way it would lop off people's heads with guillotine. Now, you said that they consulted with the LGBTQ plus community. I think they only would have consulted with the activists, because I really don't think that most gay people in Canada would object to this. I really don't think that the weaponized transgenderism is reflective of most gay people in Canada. It sounds like they've actually been colonized by radical activists. And your client, the Christian Heritage Party, really, you made the application. They had this whole system in which your party was not involved, and then they sort of said to you, this risks safety.
Yes.
Like you really were kept out of the whole process.
Yeah, so we didn't find out that there was a consultation until the final decision had already been made. The city consulted with its own advisor.
How long did this whole consultation over 4 words take, by the way?
Well, it's unclear. We don't have any information about what questions were asked, what the feedback was. We only have the city's summary. But you're right. The ad just says woman and adult female. It doesn't say biological. It doesn't say genetic. It is rather vague and subject to interpretation.
Theoretically, it could even include trans. I mean, it's just such a simple thing. Was this during the election itself?
This was just prior to the election, so this was taking place in 2023. But because of this decision, it meant that this advertisement could not be put up in time for the election.
So how did this get into the court?
So the Christian Heritage Party, upon receiving the decision, brought a judicial review to the divisional court. And that process, the hearing took place at the end of October 2024. And we got a decision in about 15 days. And the divisional court upheld the decision. It just deferred to the city, essentially. It said that the decision was reasonable, that the city had weighed the various competing interests. It had considered the rights of transgender individuals versus freedom of expression for CHP.
Do we know that they weighed outweighed freedom of expression? Was that proven in the hearing?
So the decision itself references freedom of expression, but I think one of the comments that we've made in our submissions now to the Ontario Court of Appeal is just because the city referenced it doesn't actually show that there was a depth of engagement. The protection for political speech in particular in Canada is very, very robust.
We've lost a few battles in judicial reviews as well, and for the same reason, which is that the judges just defer to the local experts. And I think that there's a trend in Canadian law not to overturn expert bodies, but there's so many of these agencies and boards and commissions, and they're not really expert. They're just, in fact, they're very susceptible to being infiltrated by activists. And I don't say that in a nefarious way. It's just who's going to be involved in reviewing ads on a bus shelter. Obviously, it's going to be activists. And to defer to them on constitutional matters is insane. Yeah. That ad is so plain. There's no safety issues there. And for a judge to say, well, might be sketchy to me, but the experts at Hamilton Bus Company say it's a safety threat. So I'm really worried about that deference. So you've filed an appeal to that ruling, and do we know how long it takes to get before the Court of Appeal?
So first you need permission from the Ontario Court of Appeal.
Well, they don't have to take every appeal just on spec.
They don't, and so you need to show essentially that you have a case. And in this instance, they have granted permission.
I would hope so.
And so that is not itself conclusive, but it does suggest that the Ontario Court of Appeal looks at the Divisional Court's decision, has some concerns, and we raised a number of them in our written materials, which were just filed last week.
I think everyone should have the same freedom of expression, freedom of the press. And I don't believe that political parties should have a higher standing. I'm frustrated by some of the censorship in this country and some of the limits imposed by Elections Canada. But that said, a political party should have tremendous freedom of expression. I should too, as a regular guy. But to tell a political party, you may not run this ad. There's nothing obscene about the ad. There's nothing criminal about the ad. You're paying for the ad. You are a registered party. You're not some banned terrorist group. But we had an expert who doesn't like it. Like that is, and I think what's important here is it's a public institution. If it were a private newspaper, I wouldn't be so fussed by it. People can do with their own property what they wish. But for the city of Hamilton, which is a large city, to ban a party. Now, the Christian Heritage Party doesn't win any seats, but it's a form. It's as legitimate a political party as the Green Party, as the People's Party.
Well, and if the city of Hamilton can do this to the Christian Heritage Party, then it raises questions about which other political parties it can do this to. And the important fact here is that they didn't raise an issue with the image, and they didn't raise an issue with any of the words, which they actually acknowledged were a basic dictionary definition. What they said was they actually went to CHP's website and took issues with CHP's views explicitly. And so the issue here is that they don't want these ideas to be shared at all. And it really, I think, is very patronizing and dictatorial for a state body to decide what views its voters can and cannot be exposed to.
And we all know which way political correctness is going in this country. I don't know if an ad promoting, if it was a Muslim Heritage Party, if they would be as corrected by the LGBT lobby as the Christian Heritage Party. But you raised a good point. If liberal or radical or Marxist busybodies can censor conservative views, can conservatives censor left-wing views? And I think by definition, conservatives generally are not as censorious. I think this is an important case. I'm glad the Ontario Court of Appeal is hearing it. All courts in Canada, I think, are moving away from freedom of speech, but I have a tiny bit of hope because the facts are so clear here. The message was not radical. It was not hateful. It was not complex. 4 words and a simple image by a political party. It's like there's no complicating factors. There's no disqualifying factor. One of the things about free speech cases in Canada is you're often dealing with a real troublemaker who's really hard to stomach, who says things that are so offensive but legal. Like that's often the front line is so far down the road. Like, I don't know if you know the famous case I refer to it all the time. In the 60s and 70s, of course, the draft in the United States, the military draft conscription, was very controversial. And someone went into a courthouse in California with F-U-C-K, the draft, right on his shirt. Right. And he was arrested and charged and went all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States, who ruled in his favor and said that using those particular words was essential for him to express himself. If he said, excuse me, sir, I disagree with the draft, it would not be the same as saying F the draft. And like, that's a hard case. Like to say someone should be able to sit in a court with an F the draft shirt on. Whoa, that's your First Amendment home, that's, I think, the high watermark of freedom of expression in America. But this is nowhere near that.
No, not at all. But it's important for viewers to understand that in Canada, there are actually robust protections for not just freedom of expression generally, but political expression in particular. And we've had some incredible cases recently from the Ontario Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. One back in 2021 called the Ward decision from the Supreme Court, where they specifically said there isn't a right not to be offended. And in that case, it was speech that was directly—
Is that the comedian out there?
Yes, targeting someone on the basis of disability. Very painful.
I know that case. So that was just one vote. That was, I think, 4-5.
It was a 5-4 decision, yes.
So just for our viewers, we've talked about this before. It's a comedian in Quebec who does comedy in English and in French, and he made fun of this severely disabled kid who sings, and he mocked him, and like, it was rough. It was really, really rough comedy, and he won. But it was 5-4. And the way society is going, I know that in about 5 minutes from now, it would be 4-5 the other way. Wouldn't you agree?
I think it is difficult to know sometimes.
Another case, the Ward case was a good one. Is there another one you know of?
So one of the points we've made in our materials is that the divisional court and the city didn't engage with any of the binding precedent. So the Harper case is one that was specifically about political expression. I think that was a 2004
Stephen Harper
CC case.
Yeah, go ahead.
Then there's the Ward case. There's the recent Bracken decisions from the Ontario Court of Appeal, where actually drawing on the American case, this was an individual who had F-U-C-K, Mexico on a sign and was holding it, and I think also China as well, and he was holding this in a public park. So, there are young children who are seeing this language. It was very offensive, but we had some incredible decisions from the Ontario Court of Appeal saying that these are public forum. We expect individuals to have a degree of tolerance. There should be a threshold of difficult speech that they are able to tolerate in a free and democratic society. And I think ultimately this comes down to, in these facts, I would respectfully submit that it is never okay for a state body with its own political bias to censor the political ad of a political party on a policy discussion that is a vibrant and fraught discussion these days. And so I think, regardless of what people might think about the Christian Heritage Party or about this issue, we need to trust that in a free and a democratic society, people are capable of hearing views, engaging with them respectfully, and then voting according to their beliefs.